You're listening to Three Kitchens Podcast, hosted by Aaron Walker and Heather Dyer. Tune in weekly to get inspired and make good food.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to Three Kitchens Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Walker, and I am joined today by Heather Dyer.
Hello there.
I almost called you Heather Walker. Well, today we have a really interesting interview to bring to you. We talked with Chef Carl Heinrich. He is a graduate of the Stratford Chef School. He was the winner of Top Chef Canada Season 2, and he is the owner of Richmond Station, a restaurant down in downtown Toronto.
That's right. And Carl is very passionate about regenerative agriculture and knowing where your food is coming from and keeping your food dollars in your local community. And these are things I think we can all relate to as home cooks, wanting to know where we're getting our ingredients, wanting fresh seasonal food. Yeah. And we all know that if you start with good ingredients, you're going to get good food at the end of it. And this is what Carl is kind of all about.
Yeah, so we have a great discussion talking about how we can build stronger relationships with our food by knowing the community of producers. And he shares what he makes when he is done cooking in the kitchen for the day, how he gets a meal in. And so we've got a few ideas on how you can make that and zhuzh it up for yourself.
He was not impressed with when I said, well, do you just throw in like a frozen pizza? He's like, no.
That takes too long, he said.
No,
so.
Yeah, he's like, no, that's actually too much bother.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you ever wondered, what does a chef eat at home when he doesn't feel like cooking a big meal? Here's one to tell you.
We talked about how to plan a menu where you either plan your menu first and then buy the ingredients you need, or to buy the ingredients that are fresh and that you see that look good and then plan your menu afterwards. And the second way, he fully admits that takes more work and a little more effort, but it always tastes better. And so that's something we've adopted. Well, mostly me. Heather's always doing that.
It was not really a conscious decision. It was more like just, I guess, a personality thing. I'm just always kind of flying by the seat of my pants. I'm not as much a planner when it comes to food. I don't have a meal plan for the week. The only time I really plan things out is when we're going to be away from home. Like if we're camping, then I want to plan it out exactly. But at home, I'm just kind of, what have I got? What can I do with it? As we found out doing this podcast, the more you cook and the more you learn new things and little tips and tricks as you go and what tastes good together, how you can improvise, you really can pull some pretty fantastic meals out of thin air.
Yeah.
Without a plan. You really can. So don't think you need to plan it every single time.
Yeah. And as somebody who's an over planner over here in my corner, I have learned to let go of that. And I have a lot more fun cooking and it's more enjoyable now. And so I think sometimes it's fun to let go of that structure and to just give yourself the freedom to take in what's around you and turn it into something great.
And trust that you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Winging it is fun.
Yeah.
Haha, I brought Aaron over to the dark side.
Dinner's better when you have just that little pinch of panic.
I don't panic.
I'm working on it, okay? I'm working on it.
Baby steps. Enjoy this conversation with Carl. He has a lot of interesting insight from a chef and a parent and a home cook himself and a gardener. And yeah, he's got a lot to teach us and I hope you enjoy it.
Hi, Carl. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are really excited to talk to a chef and a restaurant owner who also has a young family. Home cooking and what that's like for you.
Hi, ladies. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think everybody at some point wonders, like, what does a chef cook at home? Like, are you sick of cooking? Like, because if you go to work and you're cooking, when you come home, do you just want to like toss a frozen pizza in, or like, I think that
Be
we all
fed.
think that at some point. Yeah, somebody cook for me. That's what I would feel like, you know?
I love when people cook for me. I love it. There's few things I enjoy more actually than when other people cook for me, especially in my own house. But to be honest, frozen pizza takes way too long. I usually do a fried egg sandwich. So like
Mm.
toast the bread on one side under the broiler, so the soft part is on the outside. Lots of salted butter, over easy egg, and some ketchup. That's my go-to snack when I get home from work.
Okay, that's way better than frozen pizza. That just came to mind because that's what we had last night for dinner. So,
Right.
because when I'm lazy, that's what happens here.
Yeah, no judgment. Honest, and you'd be surprised. I think a lot of, well, in my experience, a lot of chefs, when they don't cook at home, their fridges are pretty bare, their cupboards are pretty bare. And a lot of that is, like you said, maybe because they're just so tired of cooking, but a lot of that is that we work so much that we don't spend a lot of time at home. There's lots of cereal in the cupboard and maybe some milk.
Mm.
So, growing up, were you in the kitchen a lot?
Absolutely. I've always been in the kitchen. And it started when I was a kid. I was born in Calgary. I grew up on Vancouver Island.
Oh, cool.
You guys are based in Alberta too,
Yeah, we're both in Calgary.
Hmm.
but I spent most of my childhood on Vancouver Island. And when growing up, I have two sisters, and my mom was a single mom for a lot of my early childhood. And I think it was maybe I was around 11 or 12 years old, and my mom would have been working, and she sat my older sister and I down and said, "Well, guys, it's really time that you help out around here, and you're going to be in charge of a dinner a week, each of you."
Hmm.
And at the beginning, it was freezer pizza and what you could, pop in the microwave maybe. But I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed cooking for my family.
Right.
I really enjoyed the responsibility. I have some relatives that own restaurants actually in Calgary as well. And when I was 13 and 14 in the summertime and for spring break, I went out to Calgary and I was dishwashing and prep cooking in my uncle's restaurants. For me, that was sort of like, ooh, this is fun and exciting. And for my aunt and uncle, that was probably like, oh, childcare. And for my mom, it was like, great. Now I don't have to hire a
Yeah.
sitter. I really caught the bug of the restaurant life and the restaurant culture. And maybe it was because of the food, because I've always loved food.
Mm,
And I love working in restaurants and I love feeding people and I also love eating.
right.
But I think a lot of it is also the professional kitchen is a lot like a sports team.
Mm,
Everybody's got a role, everybody knows their position. At the end of the day, the lights go out and you go home for the day the same way that the clock runs out and the game's over, and you come back the next day and you try to be better. And so I caught this bug when I was barely a teenager, and I really never looked back.
right.
Through high school, I was in some cooking programs, and I continued to work in restaurants, and it became very clear to me that this is what I wanted to do. And then I started cooking in better restaurants and competing, and it really cooked a lot at home. And this is where, for me, I learned some really great lessons. And I mean, importantly, it didn't matter whether it took 10 hours or 10 minutes to put a meal on the table. If it was delicious, it was delicious. And if it was delicious, people enjoyed it. And there were
Hmm.
smiles and they went for
Right.
seconds and there were no leftovers. And cooking is a very emotional process, right? And so if you can capture that emotion, I mean that feeling for me was just so satisfying. And that's what hooked me in the beginning
Right.
was this cooking for the family. And ooh, did they like it? Did I do a good job? And I mean, obviously there were a lot of failures. And I mean, nobody died, but there's some romance there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you went to culinary school in Canada, is that correct?
That's right. I left Vancouver Island and I moved to Stratford, Ontario when I would have been 18.
Okay.
And I went to culinary school at the Stratford Chef School, which is it's a fantastic culinary school. And my aunt and uncle have always been great mentors for me my whole life, but my whole career. And they said, well, if you're going to go to culinary school, let's go see them and let's see what the best ones are. And Stratford was hands down the best at the time, and in my opinion, still is. And it was a great experience, and I made some great connections there. The important part of school or college or university for anybody is what's next, right? What happens after that?
Hmm.
Does it help you land a job? What's
Right.
your internship look like? And the school had great connections around the world because they attracted celebrity chefs to come and be guest chefs at the school. And I landed what we call a stage, which is a fancy French kitchen term for going somewhere and working for free.
Yeah.
It sounds so much better the way you said it.
Because it's French, and when it's French,
It's the
it's
French.
just, yeah, exactly.
Totally.
You give anything a French name, and you can charge more money for it too,
Yeah.
right?
So going back to your culinary journey here, you landed a fantastic stage. Was that in New York?
So in this break between first and second year of culinary school, I went to New York and I staged with Danielle Boulud, who at the time was one of the most important chefs in the world, and frankly, I think still to this day is one of the most important chefs in the world. His empire has grown since,
Yeah.
but I was able to stage there at a few of his restaurants for a month and was able to land a job offer for the next summer when I was done my training in Stratford. And so at 19, I moved to New York City, and I was with the company there for about 4 years, and it was an amazing experience.
Wow.
And that's where I really honed the fried egg sandwich technique. Daniel Boulud has many restaurants,
Okay.
and he has many Michelin stars. I spent most of my time working at DB Bistro Moderne, but Michelin stars aside, I've got a complicated relationship with Michelin star. I think most chefs do. I think
Yeah.
back in the day, that was really important for me. Anyways, I look at our customers as a more important inspector of the quality and the value of our restaurant. Michelin stars don't give you that. They give you
Right.
this rating that so you can compare to yourself to the other best restaurants in the world. But being a best restaurant in the world doesn't mean that I'm going to be around for another 10 years. It just means that I'm a very expensive restaurant. So again, my relationship with Michelin is a little bit complicated because it's not as important to me as a person, as a business owner and as a chef.
Interesting. That's really cool to hear that perspective. So working with someone like Daniel, and because he was right from Lyon, I think that's so cool that you get that experience to French cooking and that sort of, I don't know how to say it, kind of like that just one step away from French cooking sort of experience.
For sure. I mean, French technique is, well, it was back then regarded as the most important technique in the world. And maybe it still is. I'm not sure. Now, after I've traveled more and I've cooked longer, I'm learning about food from different regions of India. I'm learning about foods from Spain and Japan and all parts of Asia. French food has no place in a lot of these world cuisines because those techniques don't transfer. They really don't.
Ah,
So I think as
cool.
a strong base, French technique is important. Breaking that and getting into other world cuisines is also very important. And frankly, coming back to Canada,
Interesting.
as a cook with Dynex and with Danielle Boulud, I grew up quickly in the company. By the time I left the group, I was a sous chef and I was in charge of helping create menus and purchasing and inventory, and those things were all really excited. But I couldn't tell you a lot about agriculture. I couldn't tell you a lot about the food that I was buying, other than it had to be the best, right?
Mm,
And that's a big reason why I wanted to sort of break with my norm and learn more, which is why I got into butchery. And I had a friend who I went to culinary school with, who is now my business partner, Ryan Donovan, here in Toronto. And he was a butcher, and he learned butchery, he learned charcuterie, and we
mm.
reunited at this restaurant in Toronto. And they were only buying whole animal at the time. And by whole animal,
Oh,
I
cool.
mean, you don't buy bacon, you don't buy fat, you don't buy bones, you don't buy strip loins. You buy cows and pigs and chickens and ducks, and you butcher everything in house, and you make your menu second. You buy first, and you make your menu second.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
And
spectacular. That's
right,
so cool.
I'm sure you've done this before. You buy a quarter cow and you keep it in your freezer, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
for dinner, you look and see what cuts you got, and then that's what the menu is. And when you start by buying food this way and sourcing food this way, the inspiration for the menu is very different. And for me, a big part of that is it local? Am I buying that from somebody I know? Is my purchasing dollar staying in my community?
Right. And it's
Mhm.
also more seasonal too. And then you're creating with what's available at the moment. Yeah,
It's
it's
fresh. Hmm.
What I started to learn coming here to Southern Ontario was if I go to the farm and I meet these suppliers and I sit in their dining rooms and we have these kind of conversations like we're having right now about the breed, about the feed, about the age of animal at slaughter, about how the animals get from the farm to the slaughterhouse. These relationships started to develop for me and the education started to develop, and that really created a strong base, this Carl style. So creating a menu when you're only buying whole animal and you've got a restaurant this size was a complication that I'd never experienced. And we failed fast and we learned fast. We would learn to pickle and preserve. And this whole different way of creating menu, we changed the menu every day because that's what we thought we had to do. So it was a very different concept for creating a menu, something I'd never done before. But like we said before, it was very romantic. It was, what are we going to cook today? Open the fridge. Okay, we've got this and we've got that. Let's put it on a plate. And it was always delicious
Mhm.
because the food that we were buying was always so delicious.
Very cool. So you were the winner of Top Chef Canada season 2. Was that something you applied for? Is it something they reached out for? How did that come into the circle?
The producer for Top Chef Canada, their office was across the alley. So the producers would come in.
You just had a fan set up to waft the smells over to their
I
office,
don't
and
know.
then they just
It
came
wasn't,
gathering in.
maybe it wasn't the agenda, I promise. But I was young. I was 25 at the time,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it was my first job as the chef of a restaurant. And the producer was like, I really like your food. You should really apply for the show. And the fellow who won season 1 of Top Chef, Dale McKay, him and I worked together actually in Vancouver.
Oh, cool.
So I knew Dale really well, and I grew up watching Top Chef America when I was living in New York. That was when the show first came out, and I remember watching this show and being just floored. Like, there's no way these guys can get a black box of ingredients
Oh,
like this and have 20 minutes to put something on the plate, and there's a celebrity guest chef that comes in and critiques it. Come on, these are not realistic possible scenarios.
wow. And for a professional chef to think that, I thought that's just what all of us at home thought of it, where you'd be like, oh
Right?
yeah, piece of cake, piece of cake.
It's hard. But so I applied for the show mostly because I didn't have anything to lose. Nobody knew who I was. If I had failed miserably and I lost my job because of it, I could always just go get another job and that'd be fine. So I never applied thinking that I would do very well, or certainly that I would win. But TV is an interesting world, right? I don't know if you've ever done any television. I mean, you've got a podcast, but
Nope.
in that there's a camera on your face the whole
Hmm.
time, and it's not really Top Chef. When I think of chef is you run a kitchen, you have staff. Top Chef is really top cook in that we had to
Mm.
cook. We had to put
Hmm.
food on the plate, which was really exciting. Isn't that that was it. So we just had to cook. But it's challenging because it was 6 weeks long, the filming of the show. There
Okay.
was no contact with the outside world. They took our wallets and our cell phones away. We were sequestered in a hotel.
Wow.
That's intense.
It was intense. You're in the green room waiting to get out into the, what do you call it, theater stage where we cook. And we don't know what we're walking into. We don't know what the challenge is going to be. We don't know what the parameters are going to be. We don't know if we're going to be sent home if we have the worst dish. We don't know what the stakes are if you win. Cook and go. And it's just lights, camera, action, and there's cameras and lights everywhere. And we're just cooks, right? We're not TV stars. This is not our element. So I think by the end of the day, a lot of the contestants on the show didn't do as well as they wanted to, probably not because they weren't good cooks, but just because reality TV is a very different world. It's just a game, and I love games. So it was really just a game, and trying to find the answer to the Top Chef game was a fun challenge. That show certainly helped the rest of my career. Right after that, we opened Richmond Station, but certainly Top Chef gave me the equity I needed to open my restaurant with capital. I mean, I think we would
Right.
have opened a restaurant regardless, but certainly the show helped fill the seats right away. The finale for Top Chef aired in June 2012,
Yeah.
and we opened Richmond Station in October 2012. So it was a great catalyst.
And now you've been around for over 10 years. That's fantastic.
We're old now, right? In restaurant years. I think
Absolutely.
10 years in restaurant years is like 100 years in dog years.
Mhm. Especially through a pandemic when a lot of businesses were closing, right? That's quite something to still be in operation.
You know, I'm not even going to say we're out of it yet because technically, where are we here? April 2023. There's still technically a global pandemic going on, and people's eating out habits have changed quite a bit. Certainly, the pandemic forced us to get creative and diversify our income and our revenue. I don't want to say I ever want to do it again, but we did it, and we're here today still. So, you know, certainly touching wood for all that. But there was also a lot of support.
It's interesting because you talk about these challenges of you have to be able to think on the spot and keep going. And I feel like because you were cooking like that, it applied to how you ran your business as well when everything got turned upside down.
You know, I had to leave the kitchen for the most part and focus on business during that time. And the team that we had in the kitchen was phenomenal, and they still are. And to be honest, I haven't been in the kitchen at Richmond Station since prior to COVID. Basically, last year my wife was diagnosed with very aggressive breast cancer, and so horrible timing from one crisis to another. But our lives at home really changed as well. We've got 2 young kids here. I had to take a step back from my day-to-day life at the restaurant to focus on the family here. And since then, you know, it's provided a lot of good perspective, but also, you know, talk about feeding people, just feeding my family. That's always a challenge, a fun challenge, I guess, a creative challenge. And also, you know, our diet and our lifestyle, especially with my wife's diagnosis, I'm really enjoying being at home more now and putting food on the table for my family.
Well, let's come back after a brief break to talk about how you cook for your family and bring that kitchen and restaurant experience into your home.
Hey, Erin, do we ever tell people that we have a website?
I think so. It's in our show notes.
We have a website and we post the recipes from our episodes. And we also have recipes on there that have not made it onto an episode. It's just stuff that we've cooked, tested out, and that we love.
Like what you did with that lamb short rib. That was delicious.
That's right. I make donuts with pancake mix. I have that kid who doesn't like to eat pancakes, but he'll eat one in a donut pan.
Yeah, so if you're looking for a way to do something a little bit different, we've got multiple options for you to explore.
And of course, all of our episodes, including the Speakeasy bonus episodes and the drink recipes, that's all on there. So visit us over at threekitchenspodcast.com.
We're back to talk about cooking for our families and the different ways that you can plan a menu and how you can go at it.
Right. And so there are 2 ways to make a menu, and it's same as a home cook. You can start with, this is what I want to eat. This is my prep list. This is my grocery list. And then you go to the grocery store.
That's very much the way that I used to cook because it helped me stay organized. I knew what I was eating. It was something I didn't have to think about.
Right. Or you can start with, this is the food that I'm going to buy. And then therefore, here's my menu. Now, the second way of doing it is harder. It's a more creative process, but in my experience, it's always more delicious because you're starting by buying high quality ingredients.
So I create my menu off of sort of what's in the house. And so I think that change has been the biggest one for me. And I think we eat better, tastier food because of that.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
I didn't realize how much that was changing. And I like to credit Heather on helping me be less
structured
in how I did things.
A little more of a chaotic cook.
Yeah, but I've also found like it's kind of the funnest thing to be like, what do I have in my fridge? I am not going to think about dinner until I walk into the kitchen tonight and then just make it happen. And that's so much fun. And
sometimes it's not, what am I going to go and buy? And then what am I going to make with that? It's, what have I got in the house so I don't have to stop at the store? And that is, I think, trickier because if you haven't had the forethought, what have you, then you have to kind of make something work, right?
Well, and for both you and for a lot of parents out there, what are you going to make that the kids are going to eat?
Yeah.
That is nutritious and that checks all those boxes that are important to you, right? Those are always the big
We
challenges.
also want to eat it, no?
Yeah, but we all know that what we eat is usually what they don't. Well, I think there's for our family anyways, and we're still working this. My kids are 4 and 6 years old. But for a couple of years now, I've taken them with me every week when I go to the farmers market on Saturday mornings. We've got one a 5-minute drive from our house, and it's great. It's the Witchwood Barn Farmers Market. There are great vendors there, and it's open year round. That's the way I believe in buying food, is creating those relationships and giving your money directly to the person that grows or raises that food. We eat predominantly vegetarian here at home. I know enough about agriculture that as people, we need to eat less meat. Eating meat, I think, is still important. There's a lot of nutrients that are very easy to get from eating animals. We don't need to eat meat every day. And especially for our kids, we wanted that to be an opt-in thing. We didn't want that to be an opt-out thing. We wanted them to know about meat and what it was and where it was, how it was created. They'll enjoy it and know where that food is coming from and eat it in good conscience, right? Especially when we're going to the market and we're buying it from those vendors. I really think getting them involved in the economy of this is important as well. So now when we go to the market, my kids hold the money and I take a step back and we go and we look at the table and we say, okay, I think we're going to get this, we're going to get that, we're going to get that. And they hold the money in their pockets and they go up and they get it. They put the food in the bag and they bring it back. And you know this as well, like even in your garden, if you were going to go to the grocery store and buy chives and bring it back to your kitchen, do you think they would eat those chives? Probably not. But if you let them loose in the backyard, they're going to be stinking of onion breath, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. I mean, if they see those bunches of radishes or those asparagus or the first of the season greens, brassicas, they're going to get excited about that too. And I can put a flowering kale on the grill and on the plate and they will eat it. And I think a lot of that is because they understand the story. A lot of that too, I think, is because it is delicious. But
yeah,
I want a snack. Okay, go get a turnip. and they will. But I think a lot of that is because they are part of that process. They're part of the economy of buying the food.
Yeah, my kids will always eat more out of the garden in the summer than what comes at the grocery store in the winter and when we don't have stuff locally.
Well, it just tastes better.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just to feeding the whole family there, I think, making sure that you have food in the fridge of the quality and again, that checks all the boxes. And then sometimes it takes more creativity to get it on the plate. But a lot of our dinners are, I don't want to say picnics, but, little piles of different things. We've always got sauerkraut in the fridge and the kids love sauerkraut. We've always got heaps of vegetables from the market. We've always got noodles or something in the cupboard or some whole grain breads that we can toast. So on the plate, there's going to be all the colors and there's going to be all the, the different boxes that need to be checked from a nutrient point of view. But it doesn't mean that we need to make a cohesive meal every night. Again, a lot of these meals can be a little bit more picnicky and that's totally fine because sometimes they even prefer to eat that way. No, I don't want this to touch this on my plate. Sure, fine, no problem. You don't have to have your cucumbers touch your hummus. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
Right? But if I were to make a hummus dish with all the accoutrements on top and cucumbers stuck into it, maybe they wouldn't want to eat it. So putting food on the plate is a little bit more complicated, but it can be more fun.
And I think kids like to have the power that, that they can choose. If you give them that choice in front of them, not just a composed plate, right? Especially real little guys. They like to feel like they have some autonomy and some choice and they get to pick. So as long as you're good with everything you're putting in front of them, you don't care what of it they eat. We used to always say, it's like they get really hungry right before dinner. Now we can say, okay, we're eating in like an hour, you can wait because they're big enough, they get it. But when they were littler and they were, I'm starving, it was like big panic and be like, any vegetable you want to eat, you just go eat it. I don't care. Eat all the carrots if that's what you want to have, because you know that you're okay with that choice of stuff and they feel good that they get to pick. what
Yeah,
they're having.
100%.
Yeah, that was the key at our parties too. You put out the veggie platter and nothing else, and every single vegetable will get eaten. And then when it comes to like cake or hot dogs or whatever other stuff they're eating later, they've filled up on vegetables, and it's not a terrible thing.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. 100%. We've got our bottom drawer in our refrigerator is just fruits and veggies. And the kids know anytime they want to eat something, they can just open the door and anything in that drawer is fair game. My rule is you can't just take a bite and throw it away. Like, eat it if you're going to pull it out of the drawer. I want to get into agriculture a little bit more because I know, Heather, you've got a garden, I believe. Or is it Aaron? I think maybe you both have a little garden.
We both do.
Oh, there you go. Well, you've interviewed a few serious gardeners on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I love your show, by the way.
Thank you.
I think when we can bring the two together, I mean, there's the cooking, be it professional or home cooking, and then there's the agriculture, the farming, the growing of the food. Bring them together really fortifies a lot of my beliefs in cooking. Certainly there's that, what we started with, right? There's that romance, there's the feel good. You planted the seed, it grew into a plant, now you're feeding it to your kids. There's also the deliciousness. My kids know if I bring home an apple that we didn't get from Bizjack Farms down in Niagara. They won't eat them. I don't want this New Zealand Gala, Dad. Ugh, gross. They just know what a good Honeycrisp tastes like. They make that choice, right? So there's the deliciousness there as well. But also, I believe, anyways, we have a responsibility to buy food that is better for the world, better for the earth. And there are 3 different ways to do almost anything, but specifically in agriculture, there's degenerative, there is regenerative, and there is sustainable. And so by degenerative, I mean your soil gets less and less healthy every year. There is sustainable, which is your soil continues its health year over year. And then there is regenerative, which means your soil gets healthier every year. And as consumers that spend money on food, I believe we have a responsibility to leave the world in a better place for our kids. And it's tricky now because regenerative agriculture is not easy to explain. And frankly, we don't even understand what happens in that 6 inches of topsoil. Topsoil is so complicated, but what we do know is that if soil improves in health every year, it draws in carbon. It retains more moisture. It's going to be around longer. And if it degrades in health every year, it's going to blow away in the wind. It's going to wash away in the rain. And we're going to desertify our farmland. So the birthplace of agriculture, I think about the Fertile Crescent. I think about the Middle East 10,000 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Mesopotamia. We can't grow food there anymore. And we're going to be in big trouble. We need to make our soil healthier. So not only do we have to stop putting greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, we have to find ways to sequester them. And the only real feasible way to do that is in a plant. And look around you. Carbon is not the enemy. Carbon is the most important building block of life. Everything that you can see right now that isn't made of a rock is made of carbon and was made by a plant.
That was one of the really interesting things when we talked to the gardener recently, was how to grow things in a less monoculture sort of way to increase and diversify the plants so that it builds our soils when we're just gardening in the backyard even, and just thinking about our local gardens, and to make everything kind of work together and create more of a balance, which I think is what's important too with how we're overall as a society creating a better balance between what we take and what we give back.
100%. And unfortunately, the enormous majority of the food that we consume is grown in a way that is the opposite of that. So we have a choice as consumers as to the way that we buy food and where we get it from. And I invite everybody to go and talk to people that grow food and ask them about their soil. That 6 inches of topsoil, is it getting healthier? Do you use compost? Is there animal integration? Do you cover crop? Do you change your soil from year to year and grow different crops? Do you till? Do you use pesticides? Do you use fertilizer? And not to say that every farm has to check every box in order for you to buy your carrots from them. No, that's not the point. The point is, let's start having more of these conversations, because it's in these kind of conversations that people get the inspiration. growing food in a regenerative manner is complicated because soil is so complicated. And the soil you have in your backyard, Aaron, or Heather, or the soil I have in my backyard is all going to be very different. And maybe we need to change our diets and our lifestyles and the way that we buy food.
Teaching them all those important things, that it's more than just where it comes from, it's how it's made.
So we've had farmers on the podcast. We've had veggie growers. We've had lamb farmers and beef farmers. And everybody says the same thing. This is like,
yeah,
I really like hearing this from a chef's perspective as well, and a parent and a consumer. And because it's not just the producer telling us to ask the questions and go to the farmer's market and say, where was this grown and how did you grow it? Like everybody says, go and talk to the farmer. It's why the government has something called open farm days.
Open farm days here.
Open farm days where you can go and visit farms, you can ask the questions, you can buy directly from them. Yeah. And it's because of this. And so I think you've just given our listeners lots of great questions to ask when they do go out and visit farms and talk to growers and go to the market. It's really great.
As people who aren't working in restaurants, as home cooks, we need to bring it into our homes, right? We go out to eat good food. You guys know where the good food comes from. It comes from local. It comes from knowing your sources. That's the same thing we have to do at home if we want to feed ourselves and our families good food in the same sort of way.
Yeah, and it's it's cooking. It's being able to cook. We've made this problem ourselves. Even just going to the grocery store, there's a very huge dissociation there, right? We don't want to talk to the teller. We want to keep our earbuds in. We want to check out our own groceries. There's very little relationship with food. And what I want to say is I believe that we can have a relationship with food and we can have a relationship with cooking. And it doesn't mean that every meal is going to be a hit. Some meals are going to be failures, but we have to cook. We have to get in the kitchen. We have to try cooking those ingredients. And I believe this is the way that we're going to get out of any mess that we've created.
Oh, that's really great. So thank you so much for joining us. This has been really, I could listen to you talk about this stuff all day. You're obviously very passionate about it, and really, we love that. So thank you so much.
Hey, I love your show. This is my pleasure to be here, and hopefully we chat soon.
Absolutely. Can you tell our listeners where they can find and follow you? And hopefully, if they're local, come and eat.
Yeah, please. Richmond Station is our restaurant, and you can come find us in downtown Toronto. Hopefully we'll see you there soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today. Take care, Carl.
Bye.
Bye for now.
And now for the fine print. Join us over on the socials: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and on our website, freekitchenspodcast.com. Remember, when you like, follow, subscribe, and review, it helps more people find us. Thank you so much for listening.
And this is going to sound like child labor, which wasn't.